type of employee who may not be receptive is the ones who are disgruntled because they feel that the company owes them something. Everybody must have experienced that one, right? They feel that because they were there from inception and they were there at the startup, that the company owes them something. And at some point in time, they stopped developing themselves because they felt entitled. And when they saw that somebody else come into the company, started to move up, they had a problem with that, and they start to get bitter. Then they become bitter, and then the bitterness comes out, right? That employee, of course, cannot hear you, cannot see you, and don't understand you, because in their mind, they're right and you're wrong. So I would say that's a bit of a little bit of pride there, and you know that when you're prideful, nobody can reach you, right? So in that case, I would definitely pull out the policy again. The policy is your friend, and I entreat with you to make sure that you know this policy very, very well, because this type of employee knows this company very well, because from the beginning, they probably was even a part of constructing the policy, how long they would have been there, right? So make sure that you know the policy, because they will come back for you and they will tell you, no, it's not this way and it's that way. And because I'm entitled to this, then you cannot do that. So make sure that you know the policy. When you approach them, you approach them firmly. And like I said in the for the previous employee, you want to make sure that you let them know that they're still expected to perform, and according to the job description, like I said before, and policy is going to work either for them or against them if they don't comply, right? So that is important. Let me tell you a story that my husband told me about one of his difficult employee who did not want to, who wasn't receptive. Now I'll tell you now, my husband is so patient. It's unbelievable. So when it gets to that point where he calls it quits with you, trust me, he would have done all that he should have done or could have done to do this. There was this employee who was transferred from one department to the next, and nobody ever dealt with that employee. And so that employee, of course, became even more entitled as they went from one department to the next. And when that person came to my husband's area, they were already developed into a full-blown monster. And my husband saw this, he knew this. So he said to the person, whatever was said about you before is of no consequence right now. You are here with me, and I am going to deal with you according to how you deal with yourself and how you deal with what is given to you. So whatever happened before this never existed. So of course, eventually, in the beginning, the person did all that he's supposed to do, showed himself as a model employee. Then eventually, what happened? Old habits slip in, because old habits die hard. And so that person started coming in late from lunch, late coming in the morning. He started to become a nuisance, became very belligerent with the other employees as normal, right? So my husband called him in and said, you know, I gave you an opportunity, and I told you that this is a new slate, and I also told you that if you're having any challenges, to come to me so we can talk it out, flesh it out, before you take on an emotion towards it. You know, a long talk. I'm sure it was a long talk, right? And you know what that employee did? That employee turned on my husband and said, you just don't like me, right? When you hear that you just don't like me, or you like the other better than me, etc., So my husband, of course, pulled that nice, decent policy, slapped it on the desk, and say, sir, A, B, C, D. And if you don't comply, then you know D, E, F, G is going to happen, right? Of course, he thought my husband was not serious as the other supervisors were. But oh, let me tell you, that man don't play, right? He did what he had to do, and before I know it, that gentleman was out of the company, out. So a disservice that most companies do to the employee is not correct them in the beginning. They would transfer them from one department to the next, and for each time they're transferred, they get worse and worse. And so the poor supervisor, who probably don't have any experience, have to deal with that. And that's toxic. And that's just not right, right? So in those cases, your policy is your best friend. So make sure you know your policy. Okay, thirdly, lastly, this is to me the worst, right? The employee who is favored by the hierarchy. Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you. Horrible, right? Yes. You may have an employee who is favored by somebody in corporate, and no matter what they do, they get away with it, you know? In those cases, again, you ought to follow policy, and because it may be a little delicate situation because someone in corporate is favoring this person, I strongly suggest that you speak with somebody in HR. Find out what your rights are, what you can and cannot do. Get some help, like I said, and let them know in advance before you have that conversation with that employee. When you have that conversation with that employee, based on the confidence of the information that you got from HR, you stand strong, you stand firm, and you let them know, like you did the others, this is what is required of you. This is your job description, and you expected to do this at certain time. And if not, then I'm gonna have to do this, that, and the next, right? And make sure everything is documented and recorded. And of course, they're gonna go to that corporate person and probably raise Cain, and that person's gonna call you. But when that person called you, you explain to them exactly what's happening, and you also let the person know that you spoke with HR, because you know HR is a very independent body, right? And that's a good thing. And so you have your backup there.